Hi, Zizaran here with another Blight beginner guide, and this is going to be featuring a Spectre guide. This build guide, however, is in fact made by Steelmage, a very good friend of mine, and for some reason he doesn't want to make videos. And we're slightly strapped for time coming home from Vegas, so here we are. Thanks, Steelmage, for the ad revenue. Um, Hopefully this should be like a nice introduction if you've never played a minion build before, and we're gonna have a special section and explain minions and how to use them, especially if you've never used them before. There's a ton of really nice changes coming in 3.8 that makes using minions a lot more accessible than it's ever been before, particularly that it's opened up a lot more hotkeys. Minions in the past have struggled because you end up literally running out of hotkey slots, which feels terrible. So this should be a really strong build for any league, hardcore, softcore, and especially now for solo self-found, because a few changes have been made to the game, such as minion limit being taken away from gear and added to the gem and the skill tree. So you don't have to like be chasing around for, you know, plus one Spectre chest as much as we did before. Now we're about to show a quick video showing how I use POB. It's pretty different from most other content creators, so if you have never watched one of my build guides before, I suggest you watch it. If you've already been familiar with my guides and how in-depth our POBs are with all the notes, skills, and item sections, then feel free to skip this. We'll have a skip link in the description as normal. So first you need Path of Building. Path of Building is a third-party program that you can download, and it's in the description down below. It's completely safe, and most people use it. It's a very powerful tool that lets you plan out your builds and import items, stuff like that. Now, once you have Path of Building, you can go and import the Path of Building link here by pasting it here. Once you have that, it should look, well, depends what build you're importing, because I'll use this for everything. But it should look like the build of the video you're watching. And what we do, and I'm using a Gladiator Thunder Cyclone build here as an example, I show a step-by-step of what the skill tree looks like at certain levels. So at early levels, it's very easy, especially if you're a new player, to follow. And I also say when to ascend, and the ascension points are generally here, and I'll talk about that in the specific video as well and why things are chosen. But as you can see, the skill tree is evolving over time, and sometimes there will be variations for, you know, if it's like different weapons, if it's one-hander, two-hander, and a lot of things like that. But wait, there's more. Under the skills, we usually do all like the different skills plus the leveling one. I'm trying out a new sort of like alphabetized group. So this is like your main attack skill. So as you can see here, you have ground slam to 8 to 12, but at 12 it gets replaced by Sunder, and I kept that in the same like A, just so you're understanding what I'm replacing it with if there's no leveling video accompanying it. So hopefully that'll make it very clear. Same here with obviously at early level you're using Ancestral Protector, and then you replace that same B with War Chief later on. So we'll also put notes, like for example here, Pulverize doesn't exist yet in Path of Building, and there's a few things that they're just not in Path of Building at the time that I'm making this guide. This is gonna happen a lot on videos that are made around launch. Just Path of Building's not updated yet, so that's just not what much we can do about. And for the most part, I'll always put gems in a priority level. Like my first priority is always going to be Onslaught, just because it ups your clear speed so much while killing. And you can see like different utilities and stuff. And another example here is plus blood and sand, because that again doesn't exist in Path of Building. We also have different types of items. So here we have early game axis, mid game axis, and end game axis. I think the jewels are displayed here. Yes. So the way I do this is I make some like fairly okay items that are like, you know, depending on how fast you play, somewhere that you'll have them between day 1 to 3. And if you don't know how to get a tabula, for example, you can farm that in Act 9 fairly easily in Blood Aqueduct. And we go through here, and it's I never in my guides will put resists on the life gear, because just you need to be resist capped. That's very important. 75% all resist. Remember that you lose resist in Act 5 and 10. And then on the jewels, I'll try to do 4-slot jewels and try to say as many good stats as possible for that build. So there's no, like, you don't see the same one twice here, but all of these work for the build. Hopefully that'll help. And then this is generally how I recommend rolling flasks. There's even more in the notes as well. Mr. Madiki will generally go through and tell you exactly where to buy the skill gems that you're needed. This is actually a tip by another streamer called Lyric, who said he was sad there was nothing like this in Path of Exile guides. I was like, that is actually a great idea for new players. So we have that. So if you're wondering where to buy things, or if it can't be bought by your specific class, we call it a mule, then you have to use another character to use it or to buy it, and all the details for that is in here. So hopefully it now makes more sense how to use the guides and how they work. Let's continue with the build guide. So as I said, this is a guide for a Spectre based summoner, and Spectres are basically, you kill a minion that already exists in the game and you resurrect it as your ally. Now that gives you a lot of choice over what type of minion you can use. One of the most popular one is Solar Guard, and we're going to give you 3 choices in this build that are all going to be really, really strong for especially like clearing the game quickly. Now we're trying out a new thing. We're going to do like a we're going to answer some of the questions that most new players end up asking for a build. So especially feel free to give feedback on this section because it's new to my guides. So yeah, gems for this build can be really hard to fit, and you will most likely end up needing unset rings. A summoner build, you just have so many gems that can benefit your build. So you basically want as many sockets as you possibly can. So initially, you're going to be using a mana flask on this build. Later on, you can transition to Eldritch Battery, and then you'll have no mana issues. But until then, you're going to end up using a mana flask. You can also run a low-level Clarity. So useful leveling uniques is Wraithlord, the Baron, and Matua Tupana is the main things you're going to be looking for. And obviously the standard stuff like Goldrim, Tampula. So there's a lot of really nice things about this build. One of the main ones is Mistress of Sacrifice, which has been buffed in 3.8, that lets offerings affect you. Gives you like a lot of movement speed, cast speed, and it feels really good. Fortify as well, obviously granting you a lot of defense. Then we have Bone Armor, Molten Shell, especially Val Molten Shell, and Minions. So the reason that Minions are a defensive option is they soak up a lot of projectiles and they'll stay around you and spread the aggro out. So instead of when you're being solo, all the monsters are aggroed onto you, they're going to be aggroed onto you and different minions, making it a lot easier to not die, which is great. So sustaining on this build is mostly, you're going to have some life regen, but you're also going to be relying quite a lot on flasks. Especially because you have minions, hopefully most of the time you aren't going to be getting hit a lot. So in this build, you're not the damage dealer. So all the auras we're going to be using is also going to be used with Generosity. And what that does is it means that the aura will not affect your own character at all, but it'll affect your minions in an even stronger way. So you get like a boost for sacrificing that it doesn't affect you. So for example, we're going to be using Anger for Solar Guards, and for example, Zealotry and Wrath to give Risen Val Advocates or Slave Drivers a buff. It depends what minion you end up wanting to use. Val Haste as well is just very strong overall and makes everything go faster. So the 3 minion types that we've decided to go with for this build is Solar Guards, Risen Val Advocates, and Slave Drivers. They're all really, really strong and feature really good clear speed. My favorite is usually Solar Guards. And for this build, we're using something called Elemental Equilibrium. And what Elemental Equilibrium does is that if you hit it with, for example, if you hit an enemy with lightning damage, that enemy is going to take more damage from fire and cold, but it'll take less damage from lightning. Now, this is really good for a summoner, because especially if we're using Solar Guard, then they are dealing mostly fire damage. Now, if I run around with Ball Lightning, and I hit the monster with Ball Lightning, then that means that the fire damage from my Solar Guard is going to be even more powerful. Now, if you're using either Slave Drivers or the Risen Val Advocates, we're going to take Avatar of Fire to convert all our damage to fire, and then we're going to be EEing. Then it's still fine to use Ball Lightning because you will only be dealing fire damage, but your minions will not. Your minions will be dealing cold and lightning. And we're also using Ball Lightning to deliver a curse on the enemies. So there are a few drawbacks from the build. Obviously, it's slightly clunkier and harder to understand because there are quite a lot more skills needed to be used. I'd still say it's a very, very good introduction to a minion build, but just being minions, it's a lot more things on your hotbar. You can't just run around right-clicking and killing everything, but it is an extremely strong build. This is an extremely cheap build. It'll also work really good for solo self-ban. As with any build, if you're really trying to min-max it, it's obviously going to get expensive. But for doing all the content in the game, this should be very easy to manage and very cost effective. So to sum it up, this build is extremely strong, very tanky, very fast, and very cheap. It's a super budget, something I feel safe recommending to new players. And that's why I wanted to make this guide a little bit longer to try to explain things. And it can do all the content in the game very safely. So this build has two possible leveling setups that you can use. You can use Orb of Storms for leveling in the start, combined with Wave of Conviction, and that's if you prefer self-casting skills. Now, the reason we have that in is because starting with summons and starting with Summon Raging Spirits, if you don't have any items from previous characters, can be slightly slow and slightly clunky. Obviously, we have no way of getting Onslaught, and you're not going to have an early Silver Flask as you would from another character. There's nothing wrong with starting with Summon Raging Spirits. We just wanted to give you guys another option for League start, because obviously getting ahead early can, if you're playing Trade League, give you like a cascading wealth effect where everything really, really matters early on. So you can see in the POB that we have a different setup for SRS leveling and for Orb of Storms leveling, just to help you guys out. And the bandits, regardless, is you kill them all just to get the 2 skill points. As we mentioned earlier, a Spectre is a copy of a monster that you've killed or spawned using Desecrate. Now, every zone in the game has like a specific table of monsters that exists in that area. Unfortunately, you don't need to run through a zone to find a monster, because if you use Desecrate, you can, for example, go to the Solaris area in Act 8, and you can use Desecrate there, and then a Solar Guard can spawn from there. The default key to target a corpse that you've desecrated is A. So you can hold that down and hover over until you find Solar Guard. Now, especially if you're using Solar Guard, remember to remove Spell Echo from your Ray Spectre, because if not, you will summon it twice. And most likely you're not going to summon 2 Solar Guards. You'll probably summon a Solar Guard and then some random trash mob that you don't want to use. Now, once you have that Spectre, like let's use Solar Guard as an example, that is going to be in the table of any zone that you enter in the future, even your hideout. So that means that if you're mapping and you lose a Solar Guard, then you can use Desecrate, and there is a chance that you can get a new Solar Guard using Desecrate. So you don't have to like go back to a low level area, and this is very, very nice, obviously. Now, before, we would go into high-level zones to try to spawn high-level Spectres. However, that is completely gone now, as Spectres is only related to the actual gem level that you're using. You do, however, need to resummon them if your gem level's up. So to sum up, Solar Guards are found in Solaris Temple in Act 8 and can be desecrated there. Risen Val Advocates can be found in the Temple of Atzwodel. Slave Drivers can be found in the Slave Pen, and that's the first zone in Act 5. As of making this video, Feeding Frenzy is not updated in Path of Building, so that is the 6th gem, and all the links have a plus Feeding Frenzy in it. So we have different item sets depending on what you end up running. We're still waiting for a few of the new item bases and new item types to be added to POB, which will be updated as soon as we get it. If you are currently watching a version that doesn't have, everything updated, then just try re-downloading it from the Path of Building. but it will be in as soon as POB has it. For example, the convoking ones are not in yet. Generally, we're going to be going with pretty generic stuff. Something that can be nice really early on is if you're able to delve a bit early and get some bound fossils. They can make you some really, really nice weapons. Other than that, not really much you can get on weapons early on. All the other stuff is fairly generic. You know, you want to get plus minion gem helmets is nice, especially early. If you can get that on a 4-link, obviously very powerful. And all the other gears, just generic life and resist, making it very easy to gear this character. A tabula rasa for early 6-link, very nice to farm in Blood Aqueduct and very useful. And Victorious Charity is something you really want to pick up early on. Giving Frenzy to your allies on hit is huge. Now, you can actually make a +1 minion helmet, which is very useful when you get a good 4-link early on. And you need 2 things for this. It's actually 2 recipes. You can, if you find a life flask, you have animation, then you don't need to like recipe that. To get a life flask of animation, you need any rarity life flask, an orb of transmutation, and any rarity bone spirit shield. And then once you have that, you need a magic or blue helmet, an orb of alteration, and then the life flask of animation that you made. Now that you vendor that, that will be a +1 minion gem, which then turns into a helmet that gives +1 to socketed minion gems. This is going to be really, really strong, for example, for leveling with SRS. Now we have some examples of jewels here for the build. Generally, you want to try to get as much life as you can. Hinder is really, really nice. Obviously, minion attack and cast speed and minion damage is good. For flasks, early on, there's no like unique you particularly want to go for early. Silver flask is really good because we don't really have a great way of getting onslaught. Quicksilver for movement, divine life flask for sustaining, and then you have a basalt and a granite. The granite is particularly good for your Val molten shell, which you'll be relying on every time you feel like you're taking a lot of damage. Just pop your Val molten shell and that'll help you a lot there. Make sure that you have freeze removal, bleed removal, and curse removal. They are super important and will stop you from dying a lot. After that, grounding or shock removal is like the 4th most important one. So a couple of endgame items that we're looking at. Devouring Diadem should be really nice for EB. Another thing endgame that's going to be really nice is using the new oils and the anoint mechanic to get Ravenous Horde on your amulet. We don't have the specifics of what exact oils you need to get that, but we should be able to figure that out within a week or 2. And a really nice endgame one, Scepter, is going to be high minion damage on its own, and then you can multi-mod other things like cast on cast. So whenever you're running around spamming Ball Lightning, it will spam, for example, Flesh Offering and Desecrate. As I said, the Convoking Wand isn't in yet, but it's going to be really strong and has, for example, global minion gem levels, which is going to be crazy. So, nice power creep there. As for our Pantheons, we're going to be going with the Lunaris, and the main reason and main thing you want here is to upgrade the chain one. If you go into chain map with minions, any projectiles are going to chain between both you and your minions, and that's a great way to get killed. So that's something you do want to try to get early on. So to get your chain immunity, you need to do Colosseum map and put in a Divine Vessel. Once you kill Ambrius in Colosseum and then hand that into Sin, then you have your chain immunity, making it a lot safer. For lower Pantheons, they don't really matter unless you upgrade. But once you upgrade it, Shakari gives you poison immunity, which basically lets you ignore a map roll that is otherwise very, very dangerous. Hopefully you guys enjoyed these build guides. Best of luck in Blight. If you ever have any questions, you can drop by my channel at twitch.tv/Zizaran. And if you want to help support making more videos like this, check out all the sellout stuff in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and try to die less than I do.